Hey there, everybody. My name is Leilani, and thank you for stopping by my channel, The Magical Solution. We are live here on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitch, and all the places, right? And we are moving forward. We're continuing on reading our Mediums book by Allan Kardec. We're getting there. Look at how juicy this book is. We're at the tail end right here, tail end. So let's pick up where we left off. Now, the chapter that we left off at is super juicy, and I can't wait to get this started. So, for those of you who are joining me for the first time and have never been to one of these lives before, it is okay. Do not feel bad. Let me give you a quick rundown. So, if you go to my YouTube, The Magical Solution, you will find the first book in this series, and the first book is called The Spirits Book. We completed that one. And then you can catch up with us on this book on my YouTube channel. Now, if you are joining me for the first time and you're like, well, I don't want to miss this live, and I don't want to have to go all the way back and have to rewatch everything, that's okay too. He tends to repeat himself a lot in his book, and hopefully you won't be too lost. Okay. Those of you guys who are regulars here, make sure you say hello. Hi, Tammy. Hello, Laylo. Good evening from the Bay Area. Nice for you guys to hang out with me tonight. Those of you who are on my Facebook group, make sure that you download StreamYard. Otherwise, I can't see your screen name. It's just going to show up as Facebook user in the chat. Okay? Let's get to it. So, the name of this chapter is called Obsession. Okay? And the subcategories are simple obsession, fascination, subjugation, causes of obsession, and means of combating obsession. Now, again, we are referring to spirits, right? And spirits' obsession with either things or people or places or whatever. So we're going to get into all the details. Hello, very happy Mondays from YouTube. Thank you for sharing with everyone. I so appreciate that. That's all I ask for is that you guys share and comment. And yes, thank you. So let's get to it. We are on simple obsession. Of all the difficulties presented in this practice of Spiritism, among the worst we must place obsession, which is the domination that certain spirits may acquire over certain individuals. This domination is always the work of little evolved spirits, for good ones never exert any kind of coercion whatsoever. Instead, they provide counsel and fight against the influence of evil spirits. And whenever they are not listened to, they prefer simply to withdraw. Evil ones, on the other hand, latch onto whomever they can control. If they can manage to dominate someone, they identify with the victim's spirit, leading the person as if he or she were a child. Obsession displays many characteristics which we must distinguish precisely, and which result from the degree of the coercion and the nature of the effects it produces. Thus, the word obsession is a generic term used to designate this kind of phenomenon, whose main varieties are simple obsession, fascination, and subjugation. So, simple obsession, let's break it down. Simple obsession occurs when malevolent spirits impose themselves upon mediums, interfere against their will in the communications they receive, impede them from communicating with other spirits, and substitute themselves for those who are evoked. No mediums are obsessed by the simple fact of being deceived by a lying spirit, because the best mediums are subject to deception, especially in the beginning when they still lack the experience, just as among the most honest individuals may be deceived by swindlers. Hence, one may be deceived without being obsessed. Instead, obsession consists in the tenacity of a spirit from which the victim cannot break free. In simple obsession, mediums know perfectly well that they are dealing with a deceptive spirit who does not in any way disguise they're dealing with a disguise or cloak its evil, and it desires to cause trouble. These mediums easily recognize the deceit, and since they are on alert, they are rarely fooled. Thus, the form of obsession is only unpleasant and only has the inconvenience of making communications difficult with serious spirits or those we are fond of. We can include in this category cases of physical obsession, which consist in noisy and obstinate manifestations of certain spirits who spontaneously produce raps and other sounds. Concerning this phenomenon, we refer the reader back to the chapter Spontaneous Physical Manifestations in chapter 82. So, simple obsession is pretty easy, pretty straightforward, right? So, this is with regards to mediums who are very much well aware that there are malevolent energies around and they're not fooled by these energies. However, these energies can still latch on and create a nuisance and a annoyance for mediums. Okay. And mediums who, dive deeper into their practice, such as a spiritismo, can understand that there are certain procedures that we can do to get rid of those attachments, can get rid of those obsessions. There's special baths that we can take, there's special fumigations that we can do. However, a lot of mediums who do not practice those kinds of indigenous practices, if you will, don't have a way of sort of getting rid of these spirits, so they kind of live alongside them and have to sort of navigate their work around these nuisances, which is a shame, but it's common. So the next chapter, or not the next chapter, the next category is fascination. Fascination has much more serious consequences. It refers to a delusion created directly by a spirit in the thought of a medium, which in a certain manner paralyzes his or her capacity to judge the quality of the communications. Fascinated mediums do not believe themselves to be deceived. These spirits manage to inspire them with a blind confidence that prevents them from realizing the deception and comprehending the absurdity of what they write, even when it jumps out the eyes at everyone else. The delusion can reach the point to where it causes them to consider the most ridiculous language as sublime. Those who think that this type of obsession can only touch simple, ignorant, and senseless persons that are mistaken. The most refined, educated, and otherwise intelligent individuals are not all exempt from this kind of delusion, which proves that we are addressing an aberration produced by an outside cause whose influence dominates them. We have stated that the consequences of fascination are very serious. What happens is that, thanks to the delusion that results from it, these spirits guide the victims whom they have managed to dominate as if they were blind, and they can lead them to accept the most absurd doctrines and erroneous theories as being the sole expression of truth. Moreover, they can incite them to foolish, compromising, and even dangerous acts. One can easily and fully comprehend the the difference between simple obsession and fascination. One can also understand that the spirits who produce these two types must differ from each other in character. In the former, spirits who attach themselves to mediums only inconvenience them by their tenacity from which the mediums try to break free. It is much different in the latter, for in order to achieve their purpose, such spirits must be skillful, cunning, and deeply hypocritical, since they can only succeed at being deceptive if they impose themselves by wearing a mask of putting on a false appearance of virtue. Grand words such as charity, humility, and love for God serve as their calling card, but through it all shines signs of how little evolved they are, which only those who are fascinated cannot perceive. That is why these spirits dread more than anything else persons who can see clearly. Their tactic is nearly always that of inspiring their mediums to avoid whoever might open their eyes, and thus, by avoiding any contradiction, they are always certain to be in the right. Oof. So fascination really isn't just about, being dominant over someone's thoughts, but it can go as far as making someone believe in such grandiose and ridiculous ideas to the point where people can do things like, for example, making themselves a sacrifice and strapping a bomb to their chest, or blowing up a synagogue or a religion that they don't believe in because they believe that theirs is right. Can do heinous acts. In addition, in addition, these spirits are so deeply embedded into the person's thoughts that even being around others that can show them the way and can get them out of that delusion, they're oftentimes, they feel, what's the right word? The people feel almost like, repulsed and like disgusted, and they don't want to be around people who, um, can help them, right? These spirits have a way of sort of, isolating, that's the right word, isolating mediums from those who can help them see clearly. So that's what fascination is. Now we're on subjugation, the last category of obsession. Now, subjugation is a constriction that causes its victim's will to become paralyzed, making them act in spite of themselves. In other words, they find themselves under true bondage. Subjugation can either be mental or physical. In the former, those who are subjugated are led to make frequently absurd and compromising decisions, which, under a kind of delusion, they regard as sane. It is a type of fascination. In the latter, the spirit acts upon the physical organs to produce involuntary movements. In writing mediums, it produces an incessant need to write, even at inopportune times. We have seen subjugated mediums who, in the absence of pen or pencil, pretend to write with their finger, and they could even be seen on the street writing on doors and walls. Corporal subjugation sometimes goes so far as to lead the medium to commit the most ridiculous acts. We knew of a man neither young nor handsome who was dominated by an obsession of this nature. He was coerced by an irresistible force to fall on his knees before a young woman in whom he had no interest and to ask her to marry him. At other times, he felt a strong pressure in his back and in the curves of his legs that, in spite of his resistance, caused him to kneel and kiss the earth in public places in the midst of a crowd. He was regarded as crazy by those who knew him, but we are absolutely convinced that he was not, for he was fully conscious of the ridiculous things he did against his will. He suffered from it terribly. Formally, the dominion exerted over by evil spirits was called possession. When their influence reached the point of producing an aberration of the human faculties, for us, possession would be synonymous with subjugation. However, we have not adopted the term possession for two reasons. First, it implies a belief in the existence of beings who were created for evil and forever turned to it, whereas in reality, there are only beings who are different stages of imperfection and who are susceptible to improving themselves. And second, it also implies the idea of the body being taken over by a foreign spirit, a kind of cohabitation, whereas there is actually only one coercion. The word subjugation expresses the idea perfectly, and thus, for us, there are no possessed individuals in the ordinary sense of the word, but only obsessed, fascinated, and subjugated ones. Interesting. So, spiritists do not use the word possession to describe this idea of subjugation, whether it be mental or physical, um, for those two reasons, because they don't want to give the impression that there are evil spirits, only that there are spirits of different stages of imperfection, or different stages of perfection, if you will. And yeah, so that's a really interesting take on it. I personally don't agree with that. I have my own takes on that, but interesting, right? Hi, Lucianne. So we are on the Mediums book, and we are on chapter 23. Oh, which book talks about beings of light who were once human but are now in the silver realm? We haven't gotten there yet. We haven't gotten there yet. Causes. So now we're going to get into, hi, Keats. So now we're going to get into the causes of obsession. Like, why do these things happen? Okay. Now, in the past, in the Spirits book and in the early part of the Mediums book, he did mention a few things about the moralistic and the intellectual, um, stages of a medium, and how if they are of lower moral standing or of lower intellectual standing, etc., they are more susceptible to entities that sort of match that vibration, right? That is not to say that he's going to talk about that here, but he kind of gave us a few hints in previous chapters. So let's see what he says about what these causes of obsessions are. So, as we have said, obsession is one of the greatest obstacles of mediumship, and it is also one of the most frequent. Hence, every effort should be taken to combat it, especially since, apart from personal harm resulting from it, it comprises an absolute obstacle to the purity and veracity of communications. Since obsession to any degree is always the result of coercion, and since such coercion can never be exerted by a good spirit, it follows that every communication given through an obsessed medium is of suspected origins and merits no confidence at all. If perchance something good may be found in it, it is necessary to keep it and reject everything else that displays the least reason for doubt. So, obsession is recognized by the following characteristics. Here we go. Hi, loneliness. Number one, a spirit's insistence on communicating whether or not the medium desires it through writing, audition, typology, etc., and its opposition to all other spirits to do so. Okay. Number two, the illusion is such that, in spite of the intelligence of that medium, it prevents him or her from recognizing the falseness and ridiculousness of the communications received. Number three, a belief in the infallibility and indisputable identity of the spirits who communicate and who state lies and absurdities under respectable and venerated names. Number four, the medium's acceptance of praise from the spirits who communicate through his or her intermediation. Number five, a propensity for avoiding those who could provide enlightenment about the situation. Number six, offense taken at criticisms of the communications received. Number seven, an insistent and inappropriate, I'm sorry, incessant and inopportune need to write. Number eight, any form of physical coercion that dominates the will and forces one to act or speak without wanting to. And lastly, number nine, the continuous noises and disturbances around the medium that are either caused by the medium, him or herself, or that have the medium as their target. Woohoo! Sheesh. In light of danger of obsession, the question arises as to whether or not it is actually regrettable to be a medium at all, or whether mediumship itself provokes obsession. In other words, whether this is not evidence of the inappropriateness of spirit communications. Our response is very simple, and we ask that it be pondered with care. Since it was neither mediums nor spiritists who created spirits, but rather it was the spirits who gave origin to spiritists and mediums, and since spirits are simply human souls, It is obvious that spirits have existed as long as humans have, and that they have always exerted their beneficial or harmful influence on humankind. Take that in, okay? So, what he's saying here is that being a medium or being a spiritist does not provoke these horrible things. It's not like we attract these horrible things because we are mediums. It's not like we are, attracting the devil's work because we do this thing. No. What he's saying is that spirits have been around just as long as humans have been around. And so therefore, their interaction, their interplay with each other has always been of the nature of either beneficial or harmful. Just like humans, you walk down the street, you meet people for the first time, or you engage with people, and some people you get along with, some people you don't. Some people want to take advantage of you, some people don't. Some people want to harm you, some people want to help you. It's just that's the nature of the game. And that doesn't change just because you're dealing with non corporal spirits. Okay. The mediumistic faculty is for them only a way to manifest themselves. And in the absence of this faculty, they do so in a thousand other ways that are more concealed or less so. Therefore, it would be erroneous to believe that spirits only exert their influence through written or verbal communications. Their influence is ongoing. And those who do not concern themselves with spirits or who do not even believe they exist are nonetheless exposed to it just like everybody else. Even more so, by not having any means of defense at their disposal. Bitch, what? Yes. We've been saying this for so long. As a matter of fact, what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson. He coined that whole thing. Like, science is here whether you believe in it or not. And we mediums and we spiritists say, hey, spirits are here whether you believe in them or not. And they have influence over this world, whether you believe in that or not. And you're subject to that influence, whether you believe in it or not. Now, either you're on the train or off the train. If you're on the train, that means you're open to learning the defenses. You're open to learning how to evolve your spirit. You're open to learning how to protect yourself and to discern these different kinds of spirits. But if you're off the train, God help you. That's what we're here for. My PayPal is in the link in my bio. That's what we're here for, right? So now ideally, mediums and spiritists do not want to have to pick up the messes of people who just refuse to learn and people who are ignorant. Ideally, we would like to educate and host and facilitate spaces in which people spiritually develop and evolve so that we're all in this together and so that we're all moving forward together. But, some people are a little, hard around the edges. Hi, Facebook user. Yes, you can find the chapters of this book, the Medium's book, on my YouTube channel. And I highly suggest you start with the first book, which is the Spirits book. It's a blue cover. Start with that book first and then move into this one because he uses a lot of the vocabulary that he introduces you to in the first book. Okay. All right, moving on. I'm sorry. Mm, where it is. It is through mediumship that a spirit makes itself known. If it is evil, it always betrays itself, no matter how hypocritical it may be. We can therefore state that mediumship enables men and women to meet their enemies face to face, if we may express ourselves, and combat them with their own weapons. Without this faculty, evil spirits act in the shadows, and counting on their invisibility, they truly do much harm. Through how many acts are not men and women urged to their disgrace, which could have been avoided if they had had a way of enlightening themselves? Disbelievers do not realize how right they are when they speak of someone who persists in error. His evil spirit drives him to his loss. Yeah. Thus far from making the domination of evil spirits easier, knowledge of spiritism should have as its result In the not too far off future, and after its promulgation, the destruction of such domination by giving everyone the means of being on guard against these spirits' suggestions. Then, those who succumb to them will only have themselves to complain about, right? The YouTube channel is the Magical Solution. That's magical with a CK. Now, a general rule applies. Those who receive evil written or verbal spirit communications are under an evil influence, and this influence imposes itself on them whether they write it or not. That is, regardless of whether they are mediums or believers. Writing offers them a way to be certain as to the nature of the spirits who act upon them and a way to combat them if they are evil, which is more successfully accomplished when they understand the motives behind their writing. If their blindness is such that it does not allow them to understand, others will be able to open their eyes. Now, I just kind of want to, you know, throw this in here. He's using the word evil a lot in this chapter. Again, just want to bring this up. This idea of good and evil, this dichotomy that is talked about, a lot about in this particular chapter, is not really the perspective that most spiritists take today. Okay? Um there's we understand that there are harmful energies. We understand that there are evil energies, yes, and we understand there are holy and good energies. But in terms of what it is that we're trying to do with our spiritual evolution, we are trying to have compassion. We are trying to have empathy for spirits, regardless of their nature. And their nature, what we're trying to express is of a lower spiritual elevation, right? So they're at a different stage of perfection, and the idea is to perfect ourselves, right? So when you hear these words, good and evil, just try not to get too hung up on that, and keep in mind too that this was written during a time when science and Christianity was trying to mash together. They were trying to like make religion make sense through the eyes of science, right? Okay. To summarize, the danger is not in Spiritism, since, on the contrary, we can use it to control and save ourselves from the constant risk to which we expose ourselves without realizing it. The danger is, instead, in the propensity of certain proud mediums who lightheartedly regard themselves as exclusive instruments of highly evolved spirits, and in the kind of fascination that does not allow them to comprehend the idiocies that they interpret. Damn, he is harsh sometimes. Like he really just be, harsh. Damn. Um, However, even those who are not mediums may fall into the same trap. So let us make a comparison. A certain man has a secret enemy of whom he is unaware, and who, unbeknownst to him, spreads slander and everything of the vilest nature that he can engender. The man loses his fortune, his friends avoid him, and his inner happiness is completely upset. Since he cannot discover the hand that is injuring him, he cannot defend himself, and he ends up defeated. However, one day the secret enemy writes to him and betrays his identity in spite of his cunningness. Having found out who his enemy is, the man can now expose him and recover his reputation. Such is the role of evil spirits, whom Spiritism provides us with the possibility of discovering and outsmarting. Mm, mm. The motives behind obsession vary according to the character of the spirits. At times, it entails revenge against persons who wronged them during their present life or in a previous one. Quite often, it is simply the desire to do evil, since because they suffer, they wish to make others suffer too, feeling a kind of pleasure in tormenting and humiliating them. The impatience of their victim also excites them because they then accomplish their objective. However, if the victims are patient, they tire of the game. If their victims become irritated and show their anger, they do exactly what they want them to do. Sometimes such spirits act out of hatred and jealousy toward whatever is good. That is why they cast their malevolence over honest individuals. One of these spirits attached itself like a true limper to a good family of our acquaintance, which it did not, however, have the satisfaction of deceiving. When questioned as to the motive for its attack against such good folk, instead of latching onto individuals like itself, it responded with, "They do not give me anything to be envious of." Others are driven by sheer cowardness, taking advantage of the mental weaknesses of certain persons whom they know to be incapable of offering any resistance. One of these, who subjugated a boy of rather low intelligence, responded to us concerning the reason for his choice by saying, "I feel a real need to torment someone. A sensible person would repel me. I have attached myself to a lame brain who cannot resist me." There are obsessing spirits who are not evil, who are even quite good, but are dominated by the pride of false wisdom. They have their opinions and their own theories about the sciences and social economics, morality, religion, philosophy. They wish to impose their opinion, and to do so, they seek out mediums that are sufficiently credulous to accept them with closed eyes, fascinating them to the degree that they can no longer distinguish between truth and falsehood. These are the most dangerous, for they do not facilitate, I'm sorry, for they do not vacillate in their sophisticacy and can impose the most ridiculous utopian ideas. Since they are fully knowledgeable of their prestige of famous names, they have no scrupulous about impersonating them and do not even balk before the sacrilege of calling themselves Jesus or the Virgin Mary or some venerated saint. They try to delude their victims by using pompous language that is more pretentious than profound, full of technical terms and highlighted with grandiose words such as charity and morality. They avoid giving evil counsels because they know that they would be rejected, and hence those whom they deceive always defend them, affirming, "You can see very well that they have said nothing evil." However, for such spirits, morality is merely a passport. It is the least of their concerns. What they want more than anything else is to dominate and impose their ideas, no matter how truly absurd they are. Theorizing spirits are nearly always scribblers, which is why they seek out mediums who write easily, attempting to make them their tamed and especially enthusiastic instruments through fascination. Such spirits are genuinely verbose and very prolix, seeking to make up for the lack of quality through quantity. They take pleasure in dictating to their interpreters voluminous, indigestible, and very often barely intelligible writings, which fortunately have a side effect, the material impossibility of being read by the masses. Truly high order spirits are frugal with their words, saying much in only a few lines. Prodigious fecundity should always be regarded with suspicion. Mm. One can never be too prudent when dealing with the publication of such writings. The utopian ideas and eccentricities that usually abound in them, which violate common sense, elicit a very disagreeable impression in the novices who are taken in by them, giving them an erroneous idea about Spiritism. They also serve as weapons for adversaries to ridicule it. Among such publications are those that, without being evil and without being characterized as obsession, can nevertheless be considered an imprudent, untimely, and incompetent piece of work. It frequently happens that a certain medium can only communicate with one particular spirit who connects itself with him or her and responds on behalf of other spirits. This does not always represent an obsession, since it may result from such a medium's lack of flexibility, and from a special affinity on his or her part with this or that spirit. Obsession per se only exists when a spirit imposes itself and willingly drives others away, which is never done by a good spirit. Normally, spirits who latch on to mediums in order to dominate them do not bear up under critical examination of their communications. What they see that such communications when they see that such communications are not blindly accepted but are submitted to discussion, they do not leave their mediums. Instead, they suggest that thought to them that they should avoid others. And quite often, they order them to do so. All mediums who feel offended at the criticisms of their communications are, in fact, echoing the spirit that is dominating them. And such a spirit cannot be good, since it inspires them with the illogical thought of rejecting scrutiny. It is always harmful to mediums to isolate themselves because there is no control mechanism for their communications. They should not only receive clarification from third parties, but should also study all forms of communication in order to compare them. By limiting themselves to those they receive, no matter how good they may seem, they remain exposed to being deceived as to their true value. They should also consider the fact that they cannot know everything and that they always go around and around within the same circle of ideas. So that's really, really important for you guys to know if you guys are wanting to learn mediumship and to develop your faculties is to learn various modes of communication. So automatic writing, the Ouija board, tarot card, whatever mode of communication you are using for your spirits, try and learn as many as you can. Don't just stick to one mode. Now you might have one mode that you're like really fond of, and that's fine. But make sure that you know how to do other modes of communication so that you can compare your notes. You can ask your spirit to come through again using a different kind and see if they say the same thing, right? And another piece of this that's really important is that you don't want to isolate yourself, right? Being a medium and being a spiritist, yes, it can be a solitary practice. It sure can. You can do it by yourself, not an issue. But the true, true essence of what it is that we do and the real, like, meaty part of our work is with community, right? So when you're working with other mediums, when you're going to seances and misas and sesiones, you are strengthening each other. You're practicing your faculties. You're getting better at your gifts, right? And in the same breath, you're building a network with people, right? You build bonds, you build friendships with people, and those bonds and those friendships allow you to then tap into each other when you're needed, right? So let's say you have a friend who's a medium that you've been working with for many years, and now they have a client whom they need to heal, but this particular client's healing session is going to require a lot out of them. They may end up calling you. They may say, "Hey, I need a couple of mediums to come in and assist with this particular client." And they wouldn't have been able to do that had they not had that network in place in the first place, right? So, true mediums and true spiritists, like we talk to each other. We have a network with each other, right? And that's part of our development as well. So now we're going to get into the last part of the chapter, which is how do we combat this? Like, how do we make sure that we do not get obsessed or fascinated or subjugated? All right. So it's called means of combating obsession. The means of combating obsession vary depending on the characteristic in which it appears. There is no real danger for all mediums who are good and convinced that they are dealing with a deceiving spirit, which is the case of simple obsession. It is nothing more to them than a disagreeable situation. However, precisely by being disagreeable, such spirits have one more reason to persecute their victims in order to humiliate them. I smell something burning. Okay. Sorry. I always get nervous because I live in an area that where all the houses are very close to each other, so if one thing is on fire, everything's gonna freaking catch on fire. Okay. 2 essential measures must be taken by mediums in such a case. Prove to the spirit that they have not been fooled by it, and that it is impossible that they will allow themselves to be fooled. And second, tire its patience by showing it that they have more patience than it has, right? So these are 2 ways in which you can combat being obsessed. You want to first show no fear. Show no fear and be like, "You ain't if you think you here to do something, you thought wrong," right? So you wanna make sure you're showing no fear. And then the second piece of it is to be very is to have endurance. Have endurance with the spirit. You need to have stamina, okay? Because spirits who intend to deceive, they tire out very quickly. It takes a lot of energy to fuck with us. It really does. It takes a lot of energy to fuck with us. So by you being persistent, by you having a lot of stamina and endurance in a session, you tire out the spirits who are intentionally trying to deceive you. And eventually, as they're talking and as they're communicating with you, they're going to start slipping up. They're going to start saying things that contradict each other. They're going to start sounding a little like gibberish. They're not going to make sense after a minute. And them not making sense or them contradicting themselves is a telltale sign that they've gotten tired and they can't keep up with their lies. They can't keep up with it anymore. And you've gotten yourself a deceitful spirit that you then need to get rid of. Okay, so those are 2 methods in which you can do that. When it is convinced that it is wasting its time, it will end up withdrawing, just as in the case of inopportune individuals when no one else will listen to them. Nonetheless, this is not always enough, and such spirits can linger for a time. There are some who are tenacious, that months and years mean little to them. Furthermore, mediums must fervently appeal to their guardian angel and the good spirits with whom they have affinity, praying for their assistance. As for the obsessing spirit, but at the same time, hold on, praying for their assistance. Ooh, they messed up here with the writing. Mm-mm. So, as for the obsessing spirit, no matter how evil it may be, it is necessary to deal with it strictly, but at the same time, benevolently overcoming it with goodness and praying for it. So, you see what I said there? How we mentioned that despite how evil or how harmful a spirit might be, you want to approach that spirit with compassion. You want to approach that spirit as something that needs to be prayed for. You need to approach it with benevolence and goodness, right? And the best way to combat any kind of evil spirit or any kind of spirit that's intending to deceive you is to always have an amazing relationship with your guardian spirits, your guardian angels, your spiritual court, your ancestors, and calling on them. Because when you have higher order spirits that you work with, simply them being present will remove anything of lower vibrational out of the way. Like there's just like they can't occupy the same space together. They just can't. So when you call them in, and this is why many mediums and many spiritists, when they do sessions and when they do misas, or when they give readings or when they give healings to people, they call in their spiritual court first, their guardian angel first, to take up the space first so that way there's no opportunity for something that wasn't invited to come in, right? So that's what they're talking about here. And to do so and to approach those negative entities with, compassion. Now, if it is a truly wicked spirit, it will at first laugh at all of this, but perversingly submitted to a process of moralization, it will end up amending itself. It is a conversion to be undertaken, an often painful, difficult task, but whose merit is in its very difficulty. And when it has been well performed, it always brings the satisfaction of having fulfilled a duty of charity and frequently of having brought a lost soul back to the path of goodness, right? So right there, he was actually talking about an exorcism, right? Like he's talking about when you're dealing with a truly wicked spirit and you approach that spirit with compassion and you pray for it and you try and elevate it, that shit is no fucking joke. That when I tell you that working with an evil spirit to try and pull them out of someone or to try and like number 1, it's dangerous, number 2, it's exhausting, like there's so much that goes into it, but when it finally happens, when you have your oh, the great cyanide auxiliary spirits. Yes, yes. Um, you it's just amazing to see the redemption. It's amazing to see that this energy has been shifted and, elevated. Yes, love it. It is also worthwhile to suspend written communications when we realize that they proceed from an evil spirit who does not want to see reason in order to not to give it the pleasure of being heard. In certain cases, it may even be worthwhile to stop writing altogether for some time, depending on the particular circumstance. And this is true. Like, if you've ever had to have a spirit removed from you or an attachment removed from you, and you are a medium or someone who does readings, a lot of times the person who does that removal for you will oftentimes prescribe for you to take a break, to say, you know what? Don't do your mediumship right now. Don't do readings for people. Like, just kind of stay away from this world for a little while because you're still recovering, right? Yes, cyanide. They will bend light. They will bend light. Those spirits. Yes, they will. Um. However, if writing mediums can thus avoid such conversations by abstaining from writing, the same cannot be said by hearing mediums, whom obsessing spirits sometimes persecute at every instant with gross and obscene blathering, and who do not have the option of plugging their ears. Moreover, we must realize that certain individuals are actually entertained by the trivial language of this type of spirit, who encourages and provokes them to laugh at its silliness. Rather than imposing silence upon it and guiding it morally, our counsels cannot be applied to those who want to drown themselves. Okay? So we're talking about mediums here who actually don't mind entertaining these lower vibrational entities. Now, here's where the line gets a little fuzzy. Okay? The line can get a little fuzzy because there are some spiritists who do work with infernal spirits, animas spirits, muertos, certain spirits that we would consider of not perfect evolution, they'd be of lower imperfection, right? But they work with them for their own workings, right? Things like magic, things like healing, things like and through working with them, they are actually elevating those spirits. Now, you have to be a very, 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 very skilled spiritist to do this. You have to have training to do this. Working with lower vibrational entities takes its toll out on you. And so it's really, really, really important that you know what the fuck you're doing because these energies do not play, right? But the purpose is to work with them to get them to do whatever biddings you need them to do, and you're doing so with compassion, you're doing so with certain kinds of works, and then in that process, you're elevating them. So, for example, you can use a lower vibrational energy who happens to have dominion over, I don't know, they're really good at like arson, fires and setting fires and stuff like that, right? So you have a client who has something that needs to get burnt down, and in order for them to move on, they need to burn something, right? So now you're pulling on this spirit, you're calling on this particular spirit who has dominion over arson, who knows how to do this kind of work, and you're asking this spirit to help the client, to assist the spiritual growth of this client by burning down whatever it is that they need to get burnt down, or it could even be like a metaphysical thing, whatever, right? So that spirit does that thing. Now, to someone outside of this practice, that would look like holy shit, like you've got this spirit trapped and they're in a bottle in your room somewhere and you're just calling on them and it's all like these dark candles and stuff and you're like, oh my God. But to an experienced spiritist, that's not what's really happening. Visually, it kind of looks like that, but that's not really what's happening. You're helping a person and also helping a spirit by doing a work that is part of their specialty. Um, there's a lot that goes into it. And that's just one tiny itty bitty teeny weeny little example amongst an infinite amount of examples that don't always go that pretty, right? And I know I'm getting off topic, but I think it's really important for you guys to know this. Um, because you will see that. You will. It's just you're gonna see it, right? Shit, I lost myself. Damn it. Where am I, you guys? Shifting intentions and vibrations. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Psh, duh. I stopped at the end of the paragraph. And I do that on purpose. I do try and stop at the end of a paragraph so that I know that it's the next paragraph. All right. Um, in simple obsession, there is only annoyance and no real danger to all mediums who do not allow themselves to be deceived, since they cannot be misled. However, precisely the opposite occurs with fascination. For them, the domination of these spirits over the victims is limitless. The only thing to do is to convince their victims that they have been deceived and to regress their obsession to the degree of simple obsession. This is not always easy and it is sometimes impossible. The ascendancy of such spirits over their victims is such that it makes them deaf to all reasoning, and they can even reach the point of doubting the judgments of science when such spirits commit some blatant scientific heresy. As we have already stated, those who are fascinated normally do not take advice very well. Criticism upsets them and irritates them, and they intensely dislike those who do not share in their admiration. To suspect their obsessor is almost blasphemy to them, which is exactly what the spirit wants, to make them kneel before its words. One of these spirits exerted an extraordinary fascination over a person of one of our acquaintances. We evoked it, and after some boastfulness and seeing that it could not fool us to its identity, it confessed that it had assumed a false name. We asked it why it had been abusing this individual so much, and it responded with these words, which clearly reveal the character of this kind of spirit. I looked for a man I could handle. I have found him, and I shall remain with him. But if we enlighten him about you, he will make you go away. Well, we'll just see about that. Since there is no one as blind as those who do not want to see, then when we realize the futility of all attempts to open the eyes of those who are fascinated, it is best to simply leave them alone with their delusions. We cannot heal those who, being ill, persistent in their illness and find comfort in it. Y'all, I can't even tell you how many times I kind of need to get that part of the book printed out and freaking tattooed on my forehead because it is so true. There are so many people. So many people. who are so comfortable in their own delusions of grandeur, who are so comfortable with the awful things that these spirits whisper in their ears, so comfortable with feeling low and feeling down that there's just nothing you could say to them, there's nothing you could do, there's nothing that will pull them out of that because that's where they want to be. And that goes with everything. That goes with doing work for someone, that goes with reading someone, that goes with all the pieces. If someone does not want to change, or if someone does not want to hear, or if someone does not want to grow, don't waste your breath. You gotta leave them. You have to leave. You have to leave them, right? Corporal subjugation almost always deprives those who are obsessed of the energies needed for them to gain control over evil spirits. This is why the intervention of third parties is required, who act through a magnetism or through the force of their own will. When those who are obsessed do not cooperate, then these persons must gain ascendancy over the spirit themselves. However, since this ascendancy can only be moral, it can be exercised only by persons who are morally superior to the spirit, and their power will be in proportion to such moral superiority, because then they can impose themselves on the spirit, who is obligated to submit to them. That is why Jesus had such great power to expel what were at the time called demons, that is, evil obsessor spirits. Please, please understand this. If you have an attachment, if you have a causa, if you have something that needs to be removed, if you have a spirit that needs to be expelled from you, there are two requirements. One of them is not really a requirement, because there's a loophole around it. And that first one is it needs to have your willing participation. You need to say to yourself, I want this out of me. I don't want this in me anymore. I don't want to have this attachment anymore. But let's say you are too far gone. You are too far gone. This thing has full control over your thoughts, everything, and you can't even make that decision yourself. In those cases, the third parties who are coming to assist you need to be of high moral ground. You are not going to hire someone who's out here, you know, um, beating up people, engaging in prostitution, doing all these drugs, hurting everybody, stealing, lying. You're not gonna get a spiritist who has those life behaviors to then come and try and have dominion over a spirit who's just like him. What? What'll end up happening in a situation like that, and I've seen it before, what ends up happening is now that spirit has two physical bodies to choose from. Yep. Mm-mm. Don't do that. You need to hire someone who knows what they are doing. Mm. At this point, we can only offer some general advice. Since there is no physical process or formula, or especially any sacramental word which has the power to expel obsessing spirits. Not true, but we'll roll with it, right? What is sometimes lacking in those who are obsessed is sufficient fluidic power. Mm, we'll get into that in a second. In this case, the magnetic action of a good magnetizer can provide them with effective help. Moreover, it is always a good idea to obtain through trustworthy mediums the counsels of a high order spirit or guardian angel. The moral imperfections of those who are obsessed are frequently an obstacle to their liberation. Following is a noteworthy example that may serve as a bit of instruction for everybody. Here we go. For several years, a group of sisters had been the victims of very unpleasant acts of depredation. Their clothes were constantly being scattered throughout the house, even in the ceiling, and were shredded and cut and poked full of holes, no matter how careful the sisters were in keeping them locked up. And since these ladies were isolated in a small provincial town, they had never even heard of Spiritism. The first idea to occur to them was naturally to believe that they were being victimized by pranksters. But the incidences persisted, and the precautions they took led them to give up on that idea. Only after quite some time, and thanks to a few references, they were directed to us to try and determine the cause of the disturbances, and if there was any possible remedy for putting an end to them. The cause was obvious, but the remedy was very difficult. The spirit who was manifesting itself was obviously a malevolent one. Upon being evoked, it displayed great perversity and was inaccessible to good sentiments. However, prayer did seem to exert a good influence on it, but after a short break, the depredations began once again. A high order spirit was then provided this advice: the best thing for the ladies to do is to pray to their protector spirits, not to abandon them. And I have no better advice to give them than to delve into their own consciousness and come to terms with themselves as to whether they have always practiced love and charity towards their neighbor. I do not mean the kind of charity that is doled out, but charity of speech, because unfortunately they do not know how to hold their tongues, and therefore they do not justify their desire to be free of their torment by pious acts. They truly love to speak ill of their neighbor, and the spirit who is obsessing them is taking his revenge, for during his life he has been a scapegoat for them. They only need to probe their memory, and they will soon discover whom they are dealing with. However, if they resolve to mend their ways, their guardian angels will return to them, and their presence alone will be sufficient to drive off the evil spirit who has attached itself to one of them in particular, because her guardian angel has withdrawn from her due to her reprehensible acts and her evil thoughts. They must pray fervently for those who suffer, and above all, they must practice the virtues that God recommends to all according to their situation. So, upon commenting that these words seem to us to be a bit severe and that perhaps they should be toned down before transmitting them, the spirit then added, I must say what I must say. Yo, the spirit literally said, I said what I said, bitch. I said what I said. That's literally what he just said. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. That was funny. I must say what I must say. Because these ladies are accustomed to believing that they are doing no harm with their tongue, when in fact they are doing great harm, thus it has been necessary for this spirit to shock them in such a way as to serve a warning. Remember, we talked about this. We talked about this in the other chapter, right? That sometimes when you act in a fool, your spirit guides will withdraw a little bit. They won't go away, but they will withdraw a little bit and kind of go on the sidelines real quick and allow sort of, little prankster spirits to kind of come in to teach you lessons about yourself and to kind of shake you up a little bit. They'll come in and they'll rescue you from it, but they will do so after you have learned the lesson. And that's kind of what's happening here. Like their guardian spirit was basically like, yo, this kinda needed to happen because these bitches' mouths just be running, and so we needed to shut that down real quick, and now that we're shutting it down, if they just pray and they do right by their face, by their mouth, we'll come back and we'll make sure this won't happen again, right? This resulted in a far-reaching instruction in affirming that moral imperfections may give access to obsessor spirits, and that the surest way of getting rid of them is to attract good spirits through moral deeds. Good spirits are naturally more powerful than evil ones, and their will is sufficient to repel them, but they only answer those who help themselves by making efforts to improve. Otherwise, they stay away, they leave the field free for evil spirits, who thus become instruments of punishment. Good spirits allow them to act for this purpose and this purpose only. Mm, mm. However, there's always a however. Allan Kardec never knows how to finish a fucking thought. There's always a however, right? We must avoid attributing to the direct action of spirits all of our troubles, which are usually the result of our own carelessness and lack of foresight. A farmer once wrote to us that for 12 years all sorts of mishaps had befallen on his animals. His cows had either died or no longer gave milk, and his horses and sheep and pigs had died. He had offered many novenas, which had no remedy to the problem, nor had the masses he attended or the exorcisms he ordered. Thus he believed, according to farm superstition, that his animals had been the target of a spell. Deeming us unquestionably to possess greater power to conjure than the priest of the village, he asked us for advice. Here is the response that we received. The death or sickness of this man's animals stems from his inaffected stables, which he has not cleaned because it would cost too much. We shall close this chapter with the spirit's responses to a few other questions that will support what we have stated. So we're going to end it with the Q&A, right? So he's going to ask the question and the spirit is going to answer. What shall close this chapter with the spirit's response to a few other questions that will support what we have stated? Why can't certain mediums free themselves from evil spirits who attach to them? And why don't the good spirits whom they call upon have enough power to drive the others away and communicate through their intermediation? Good spirits do not lack the power. Rather, the mediums are almost never in any position to help them. Their nature is more adequate for other relationships, and their fluid identifies more with one spirit than another. This is what gives such power to the spirits who want to deceive them. So, again, it's about what your fluidic vibration is doing at that time. That's the kind of spirits that you will attract, right? However, however, it seems to us that there are truly deserving individuals who are morally irreprehensible, but who are nevertheless prevented from communicating with good spirits. It is a trial. Who knows if they might have a stain of evil on their heart? If a little pride does not hide behind their appearance of goodness, such trials reveal to the obsessed their weakness and that they should strive to be more humble. Is there anyone on the whole earth whom you would call perfect? Those who seem to possess all the appearances of virtue can still have many secret defects, an old leaven of imperfection. Thus, for example, if you say that some particular man does not practice any evil, then he is loyal in all his social relationships and that he is good and worthy individual. But how do you know that those qualities are not stained with pride? That there is not some trace of selfishness in him, that he is not greedy or jealous or resentful, slanderous, and many other things that you do not perceive with your eyes, since your relationship with him gives you no opportunity to discover that. The most powerful means of combating the influence of evil spirits is to approach the nature of the good ones as much as possible, to perfect your nature, right? Number three, the question: is the obsession that prevents mediums from receiving the communications they desire always a sign of their unworthiness? I did not say that it is a sign of unworthiness, but that there can be obstacles to certain communications. They must endeavor to overcome such obstacles, which are to be found within themselves. If they do not, their prayers and their supplications will do nothing. It is not enough for a sick person to tell the doctor, "Give me health, I want to get better." The doctor can do nothing if the sick person doesn't do what is required. Question number 4. Then could the privation of communicating with certain spirits be a kind of punishment? In certain cases, it may be a bona fide punishment, just as the possibility of communicating with them is a reward that they should try to merit. Can we also combat the influence of evil spirits by guiding them morally? Yes. And that is exactly what you should do because it is often the duty that has been given to you, which you should charitably and devotedly fulfill. By means of our good counsels, you may lead them to repentance and hasten their advancement. So, how can we have more influence than the spirits themselves in this case? Perverse spirits more often draw close to humans whom they seek to torment rather than spirits whom they try to avoid as much as possible. When they draw close to individuals who attempt to moralize them, they at first do not listen and they even laugh at them. However, if such individuals know how to persist in the matter, these spirits end up being affected by them. High order spirits can only address them in the name of God, and this terrifies them. Humans obviously have no power than high order spirits, but their language is more accessible to a less evolved nature. And seeing the influence they can exert over low order spirits, they better comprehend the solidarity between heaven and earth. And furthermore, the ascendancy that humans can have over spirits is in proportion to their superior moral development. They cannot dominate highly evolved spirits, or even those who, without being so evolved, are nevertheless good and benevolent. However, they can dominate spirits who are of low moral development. If it develops further, can corporal subjugation lead to insanity? Yes. A kind of insanity whose cause the world does not recognize, but which is in no way connected to ordinary insanity. Among those who are treated as insane, there are many who are really subjugated instead. They require moral treatment because they become truly insane when they are given treatments intended for the organic cause. When doctors understand Spiritism sufficiently, they will know how to make the distinction and will heal a larger number of ill persons than they do with their present technologies. And that is not wrong. Now, he's not saying that all mental health issues are a spiritual nature. Please don't get that twisted. Anyone who says that all mental health issues are spiritual, that schizophrenics are just nothing more than like shamans and shit, are fucking crazy and you need to stay far, 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 far away from them. But he is saying that there are some mental attachments that happen. There are spirits that will latch on to the thoughts and cause grandiose thoughts and cause issues that make people so caught up in their own delusions and lies that then they become insane. And it's not something that's okay. A mental illness that is of organic roots cannot be reversed. That's something that's of an organic problem. It's an organic disorder. There's something wrong with the brain, right? And with the chemicals in the brain, right? A spiritual mental health issue can be reversed. That can be undone through spiritual means. Okay? And very much in today's day and age, we can see those differences now. Like we know what the issues are now. Okay, and the last question of the chapter. What should we think of those who see some kind of danger in Spiritism and who think that the best way to prevent it would be to prohibit spirit communication altogether? That's the question. So, in seeing evil things happening, in seeing evil spirits, they blame spiritism and say, you know what, I'm just not going to involve myself in that at all. What do you say to that? And the spirit says, even if they could prohibit certain persons from communicating with spirits, they cannot prohibit the spontaneous communications given to these same persons because they can neither suppress spirits nor prevent them from exerting their secrets, their secret influences. Such an attitude resembles that of children who close their eyes and believe that no one can see them. It would be crazy to suppress something that offers great advantages just because imprudent people might abuse it. The way to prevent problems is rather to make this doctrine fully understood. Mm. So that is the end of this chapter. We did it. I went 15 minutes over. I do apologize. But to let you know for the next time we get together, the next chapter is called The Identity of Spirits. And the subcategories are possible proofs of identity, distinguishing between good and evil spirits, and questions concerning the nature and identity of spirits. So that's what we'll be going over next time. Do you guys have any questions about anything that we've read so far, or do you have any comments? That was a really meaty and juicy conversation. It really had a lot of stuff in it. It's true. A prime example is me being bullied by upset Rohan for the past 3 months. I don't know what that is. 10 for 10. Oh, thank you, Dragon. Thank you, ladies. So, you guys, those of you who did join me later in the live, make sure you go to my YouTube channel, The Magical Solution, so you can catch up on all the previous chapters. You want to start with the first book, which is the Spirits book, and then you want to go into the Mediums book, which is the one that we're on now. Okay. Now, for everyone else, I just want to let you guys know that my next semester for my mediumship spiritual development intensive class will be starting in June, and registration is open. All you have to do is go to my website, do the drop down menu where it says services, and click on the June registration for my mediumship class. So it's a class that is very intense. It's kind of like a college course. I'm not gonna lie, it's very intense. So I highly suggest you bring a notebook, you bring a pen, you really like have yourself mentally ready to listen to all this information. It's gonna be a lot. And we host it on Fridays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. So it's a 2 hour class. It's on Zoom. You're going to be seeing slides. You're going to be hearing audio. You're going to be looking at videos. I'm going to give you opportunities to do question and answers with me. You'll get homework and you will get office hours with me to answer your questions and to help you between classes. Okay. So, and you get a certificate at the end of the entire series. And you are invited to then join our online misas, our online spiritual development sessions that we host with other really amazing mediums and past students from my previous classes. So it's a great opportunity, very affordable price, and I really do hope that you guys come and that you guys join and you guys let other people know about it because again, being a medium isn't just about communicating with the dead. It's much deeper than that. Being a spiritist is someone who has a role and responsibility to not only elevate your spirit, but to elevate anyone else who is willing with open eyes and open ears and open heart, who's willing to learn. And so I'm offering these classes to those willing participants to help spiritually develop you and to help elevate you to the best of my ability, and then to open you up to a network of other mediums and other spiritualists who are also phenomenal, who can then take you on to even further your development. Okay. So I hope you guys understand that. I hope you guys take advantage of that. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, tell people about it, and don't forget to go to my website www.themagicalsolution.com And thanks again so much, everyone, for a lovely, lovely night. This is how we grow.